Ladies and gentlemen, Cordkillers is for the news, Spoilerin time for the reviews. And on this episode, we are going to talk about the third episode of Season 6 of Justified, the third episode of Season 3 of Leftovers, the second episode of Season 3 of Fargo, the second episode of Season 3 of Better Call Saul, the season finale of The Expanse, and the season premiere of American Gods. I'm Tom Merritt, and here to help me spoil all of that and more is Mr. Brian Brushwood.
I'll tell you what, man, I'm depressed, I'm sad, I got things that are making me miserable, but the one shining joy of ray of light in my life is the fact that we have Engadget's fantastic Nicole Lee joining us live.
Wow, Brian, that's a tall order to live up to.
It's really not. When you hear how miserable I am about all of these other things, you'll feel like I just showed up. That's all you had to do to be the brightest thing in the room.
Thank you for having me.
That's a good save, Brian.
Hey, Nicole, have we mentioned that we all get together twice a year and do a fantasy draft of movies?
No, tell me more.
Oh, dude, well, you're going to learn all about it when we check in with this year's summer movie draft.
I'll be honest, I really like being in first place, and I'm going to enjoy it as long as I can. But with the Fate of the Furious only pulling in $192 million in its last week to pull in serious money before Guardians comes out, I need it to hit 230. I don't think it's going to hit 230. It'll bust up above 200.
Yeah.
But,
I don't mean to dig on. I don't mean to throw dirt on your grave here, Tom. By the way, Nicole, if you're wondering what's going on, basically at the beginning of every summer season, we split up all the movies. We all get $100. We bid against each other on which ones we think will make the most money, and it's basically fantasy football from here. And in this case, we thought DTNS was a runaway, definite winner, but Smurfs did not perform terribly well. Fate of the Furious had a strong opening, but a massive fall off. It is now number 4 in the entire franchise history, which is a bit surprising for this guy. Captain Underpants, I think, still has big potential. Wonder Woman, I am hearing, number 1, whether or not it's good or bad, it is unbelievably underpromoted.
Oh my God. Like, can we talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, please.
Like Wonder Woman, the initial trailer that was all over the internet like not too long ago was fantastic. It was an amazing trailer. I was like, finally DC, great movie, cross fingers, let's see this thing, right? It's been like crickets since then. I feel like I've heard nothing about Wonder Woman. I've heard like Guardians of the Galaxy all over the place, but like nothing. Like, what's up with DC's marketing machine?
Well, and I'm glad that you're pinning the blame exactly where it deserves to be pinned, because it's not that nobody's saying good things. It's that the fan populace has been given nothing to work with. Like if by this time, Batman versus Superman, Suicide Squad, we're looking at 20 different versions of the trailers. There are five different versions of the trailers if you look at their YouTube page.
Now, it goes without saying that The Circle didn't do well, so we won't dwell on that. And it's 9.3 million. Oh, to be fair, Team Cordkillers did not pay a lot for it, and don't be confused, Nicole. Team Cordkillers is not me or Brian. It's our frequent guest, Christy Cates and Malango. They didn't pay a lot for it, but it still did not do anything, and it's about to get obliterated by Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, I already have my tickets for next week for Guardians of the Galaxy.
That's gonna be killer.
By the way, I'm gonna have to eat crow because a big part of my heavy bet on Guardians of the Galaxy, I should say our heavy bet, Justin and I, was on the belief that there was some phantom, like dark matter reason that it got a perfect 100 out of 100 in the Friends and Family screening. And it turns out that from what I'm seeing in the reviews, there really isn't. It's basically just straight up the first movie again, but funnier, which is good, and I think it'll do well. But it basically, I was operating under the assumption that we could assume just like Civil War was kind of a de facto next Avengers franchise movie. I was hoping this one would be, and it doesn't sound like that's the case.
But that doesn't mean it isn't going to make bank.
Correct. Correct.
Oh,
it probably will.
Totally will.
My only hope is that the down Fate of the Furious is an indicator that people aren't going to see movies this summer, which I think is probably not true. So,
yeah, that might be a bit of a stretch, to be honest, but yeah.
All right. Before we get into spoiling, we have a general feedback. We call this Triage from Andy in Taylor, Texas, who says, if you haven't liked the last 5 episodes of a series that has had 8 episodes, would you still call yourself a fan of it? Maybe you thought the 7th episode was good, but only with caveats. My question is, Brian, do you still consider yourself a Star Wars fan? You hated the prequels, but it's a myth that most people hated them. Check the Rotten Tomatoes critic and the audience scores. None of them were under 50%. You have enthusiasm for... Well, I mean, he's just picking a fight there, right? Like, Brian doesn't like him. It doesn't matter if other people do or do not like him.
Exactly.
Andy says, you had enthusiasm for Force Awakens, but then recently said something along the lines of, it wasn't as good as you remembered. Rogue One was a success story.
That is incorrect. I did say those words, but I was saying it about Guardians of the Galaxy, which I still love, but as happens with many movies, the moment you see it, it's explosive and it's the first time you're experiencing something and it's amazing, and then you go back and watch it and you're like, well, this is a little bit paint by numbers.
Now you did not think Rogue One was great.
Force Awakens. Force Awakens was not the movie I was talking about when I said that.
Right, but no, he goes on to say Rogue One, in your opinion, failed.
Yes, agreed.
Okay. Here's his question. He says, I predict you will continue to find future Star Wars movies unsatisfactory. At what point do you just say, Star Wars, I'm not really a fan?
The moment I stop believing in Star Wars. And keep in mind, this comes from somebody who has read 20 of the Expanded Universe novels and loved many of them deeply, who as a result of the Expanded Universe novels, went on to follow the other literary works of Timothy Zahn and experienced other worlds and galaxies and stuff out of the expanded mind out of all these things. I will always, when a baby chick imprints on something, they can't change what they imprint on. They love it forever. I will always love Star Wars, and I will always hope it is as good as it could possibly be. And if it keeps disappointing me, I will keep grousing about how it disappointed me and it kept not being the thing that I want it to be.
I will say I think the biggest fans of any franchise are often its biggest critics of anything. Doctor Who, Star Trek, its biggest fans are often its biggest critics.
Yeah, you're right, because the opposite of love is not hate; it's apathy. And if you don't really care, you're like, I don't know. It was cool when the guy's claws came out and he punched the bad guy. That's the most scathing indictment you could give of Logan. But of course, you're not going to feel that way. You're either going to love or hate it.
Here's where I think some of what he's saying comes from. There is an unfortunate narrative perpetuated on the internet that if I like something or don't like something and you disagree, you're wrong. And because Brian is disappointed by Star Wars doesn't mean Star Wars sucks or that you're wrong for liking it. It means Brian doesn't like Star Wars or is not liking a particular aspect of it. Well, and that's all it means.
Specifically, it just, and I'm glad you used that phrase, is disappointed by. I love my daughters, but I am constantly disappointed by them. and so likewise, I can love Star Wars and be disappointed with every movie going forward, and I will still love it.
Yeah. And that doesn't threaten Andy's ability to not be disappointed by
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
All right, let's get into American Gods. Victor in Anaheim, California kicks us off and says, hey guys, been a fan of the show since the beginning, and I wanted to mention a line from Technology Boy in this premiere episode where he said language is a virus. Could this be a nod to Snow Crash, a book that deals with technology and religion as well? Victor, this is going to be the fun part of American Gods because it was fun in the book, is taking all the various homages to mythology, other sci-fi writers, fantasy traditions, historical events that Neil Gaiman expertly weaves into this story.
Yeah, man. I got to tell you, I like my gut reaction is no, it's not, but also I don't know what happens behind the scenes with all that stuff. Yes, that is a similar theme to something in Snow Crash. Yes, the quote unquote god of technology as he's represented in the show almost certainly should be the embodiment of themes of that quintessential, visionary 90s post-apocalyptic, apocalyptic, whatever. Like yet, yes, in theory, might not be in practice. That's all
I don't
say.
know if Neil Stephenson's name was running through Neil Gaiman's head when he wrote this part, but I'll guarantee you that the entire tradition of cyberpunk literature was hanging in his brain as he wrote it.
Right. Speaking of which, let's break down American Gods. Nicole, what did you think?
So, I am a big fan of the book. I've read it multiple times over, so I was a little bit skeptical going into this on whether the TV show will live up to like the visions that is painted in my head. And a few things right off the bat that I loved. The scene where the early Vikings arrived in the Americas. That was an amazing little sequence. It was very short, but it's a good little sequence. It sets up the whole premise, right, of the gods coming to the new world and sort of just being there waiting for, I guess, the new arrival of people coming to the Americas. That was great. The scene with Bilquis, better than I thought it would ever. Like, it was exactly like I pictured it in my head. It was so good.
I didn't think they could pull it off on TV. I had no idea how they were going to do it, and they nailed it.
They totally nailed it, and I was thinking the same thing. Like, how are they going to pull this scene off? They totally nailed it. And the fact that Shadow's character in the book, it was very internal, very quiet, kind of a silent character, very internal dialogue, and they managed to make him, I think anyway, to have that same stoic character, that sort of silent character, strong and stoic character, sort of deeply brooding at some points, and have that be still part of his characterness, I guess. That was great. Ian McShane as Wednesday. So good.
My God.
Oh my God.
Ian McShane, since I saw him on Deadwood, I don't know that I've ever seen any one role he's performed in anything ever where he was not the most magnetic, wonderful thing in the entire show. And this is no exception. And in fact, like Mr. Wednesday is no slouch of an actor himself, right? So it's in character for Mr. Wednesday to put on the act of being a doddering old man to get his way into first class. That was wonderful showcase of his chops.
So great. Matt Sweeney, the leprechaun, he was so good. There are all these
Nick Sobotka from The Wire, by the way. Same guy.
What?
Yeah.
What? Now I'm going to have to go back and watch that again. That's amazing.
Yeah. He's Sobotka's son.
Oh, that's amazing. This is the garbage kid, right? The one that screwed everything up. Wow. Yep. Wow.
And the little sort of, if you read the book, you know that the foreshadowing of having Loki Lysmith be Shadow's prison buddy there. So you know that foreshadowing already. But it's really good. It's like the way they managed to translate key aspects of the book into the TV show was really well done. There were some new things here and there, like for example, instead of a white limousine, there's like a virtual reality helmet, right, to sort of introduce Technology Boy.
Right.
So that's sort of a new, CG effect thing, and I thought it went well. I thought it worked well.
Yeah. In fact, actually, we have a moral dilemma for the first time, or not for the first time, but for a recent moral dilemma in that you and I, Tom, have read the book, and ostensibly the series is just about the book. I don't know if they're going to just do the book as the first season and then go to other places from there in this new world?
No, Gaiman has said that he has even gone to the extent of making sure that things that Brian Fuller thought were irrelevant stayed in episodes because he knows they are going to be in the sequel book to American Gods, which he says they will start to hit around season 5 of the Starz series.
So we have a moral obligation, I think, to make a decision to either have all our Spoilerin be from the perspective of people who know how the book turns out, because there is a delightful surprise near the end, or
Okay.
not. And I feel like I want to restrict our talk just to what we're seeing on the show.
Okay.
I agree, because
Okay.
here's the thing. If you have read the book and we restrict our talk to only what's on television, it does not reduce your enjoyment of discussing it. It just gives
Correct.
you that little tee-hee in the background, like, but I know where it's headed.
Correct.
If we do talk about book spoilers, then you're leaving out a big chunk of people who are only watching the television show.
Yeah, and actively, certainly robbing them of any chance of a surprise. Because there are some great surprises near the end of the book, right?
Here's my question, I think, and it would be a question to ask any and all viewers of the American Gods, the TV show, who have not read the book. I want to know how they feel about the God stuff. I want to know how they feel about the Bilquis scene. Like, did it shock them as much as, it did everyone else, I suppose? And I would love to know that.
And I don't think this is violating the rule that I myself just passed into motion. I remember watching the show, and how I felt during the Bilquis scene was exactly how I felt at that exact moment in the book, which is just confused, just akimbo. Like I don't know exactly what this is. Weird. What does this mean? Because in the show they have not clearly defined what is happening and who these beings are that you're seeing. Are they actual gods? Are they the show is causing me to ask all the same questions that I had when I read it in a book. Is that how you feel, Tom?
Well, yeah, I'm watching it next to Eileen, my wife, who's never read the book, but is very much into this because of her job, where they're going to be discussing it in the videos and things that they produce where she works. So she needs to watch it. She's excited to watch it, and she is confused as hell. I asked her what she thought of the first episode, and she's like, "I don't know yet. I can't, I don't know what's going on." So,
which by the way, is exactly how I felt for that first third of the book. I'm just
Absolutely.
like, okay, it's just vignettes without context, and you're like, I guess that happened. I don't know what that means, and then on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Right. Drinking mead. Ooh, what does that mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, as we get to know Mr. Wednesday, particularly, I remember the moment when I had some revelations about him and his nature and everything. So, well, I'm excited, and I'm very much looking forward to next week. I have to say, well done, Stars, for putting together a great team to put this together. This is as dark and gothic and gory as it should be to tell this story. Looked great.
I mean, the cinematography was great. All the the bloody effects flying through the screen. I mean, it was beautiful. Like I don't know, the fidelity, the sharpness, the way they frame certain scenes.
The number of arrows per square centimeter of skin.
Which, by the way, I felt like Nicole. Did you watch Preacher last year?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so I feel like American Gods did something that Preacher did very, very well, which is kind of inoculate you to the idea of over-the-top imagery for the sake of putting you in the right headspace to appreciate some of the out-there elements that you're about to encounter.
Yeah.
Preacher opens with this over-the-top, cheesy 1950s sci-fi style opening that sort of programs your brain for schlock and all that stuff. And as a result, when people's heads explode and there's blood everywhere and it's over the top, like you roll with it and it doesn't seem that outrageous. I feel like that's what the Arrows scene, the idea that from the wood, unseen Native Americans, are able to.
Great scene, by the way. Fantastic.
Wait, that
scene.
was America?
I assumed. I don't know. It is called American Gods.
No, of course. All right. Any other last thoughts about American Gods before we let Nicole go?
I don't know. It was great. I loved it. We'll see like how true to the book it stays and whether it diverges enough to keep it interesting for TV. I think that's kind of the idea anyway. And I am excited.
A quick question, Nicole. How much do you care about it sticking to the book? Because if there's one thing that the experience of Game of Thrones has taught me is that diverting from the book can be a wonderful, wonderful thing and offer some delightful surprises to even somebody who's experienced it.
I think it depends. I think if it diverges from the book in a good way, right? If it tells the story better, if it moves characters along better, easier, it sort of sharpens their personality more, totally go with it. I think at the point where it might be a little bit weird for me is if it changes the fundamental like story of it, or changes the motivations of the character. Then it might shift my opinion one way or the other. But it depends, right? So I don't know.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you, Nicole, again for joining us. We're going to move on to spoil like 16 other shows now. But if people want to follow you, twitter.com/Nicole is the best place, right?
That's right. And I will talk more about American Gods there probably.
All right.
Awesome.
Keep an eye on it. Go follow Nicole. Thanks again, Nicole.
Bye.
All right. We move on to the season finale of The Expanse. And apologies, Expanse fans. We may be keeping, in fact, all of these shows, we may be keeping a little shorter than normal, but especially because we're lagging a week behind. So, Brian, just give me the download of finally wrapping the season, which you thought had already wrapped. How did you feel going into this episode?
You were correct when you expressed that the actual finale would feel more like a finale than the one before it. However, I got to tell you, there wasn't that much that happened in this last episode. To be honest, it felt like The Expanse is number one, they're bucking the trend in that the most exciting episode of this season is dead in the middle, where you see massive transformations as far as who's in, who's out, and what's where. There was some feel good vibes, you know, like getting the confirmation that the proto-molecule being in the ship, like that felt like an isolated Star Trek puzzle episode, because you had two people trapped. You had Christian trapped behind some cover with a Mexican standoff, and you had the crew trapped with the proto-molecule being trying to figure out what to do with what, and they solved them both. And along the way, you got some hugs and some vibes that we're all on the same team again. But outside of that, it really didn't feel much like a big gasping breath season finale moment at all, with the exception of maybe the storyline of the impending face-off between Mars and the what I assume is the Earthling. What do you call them when you send out a group of people? Dispatch, trying to get down to closer to the surface of Venus. I mean,
well, except that they're done for, right? Like, we saw them disassembled.
Well, we saw them extruded and exploded.
Yeah.
But in a very supernatural way, which suddenly triggered in my mind, all bets are off story-wise. Are they being absorbed into a hive mind? Are they being protected?
Well, sure. I'm not saying you won't necessarily see those people again, but they are no longer the people that went down there.
Okay. Well, that's
right. Don't you think?
Hearing it from a guy who's read the books,
okay,
I'm going to assume
this is
so.
not from a guy who's read the book at all. This doesn't happen in the book.
Okay.
Well, all I'm saying is we just saw a ship pulled apart and people sitting in seats in open Venus atmosphere. That is something that you could not survive as a human.
Well, if
you are brought through that, you're either dead or your proto-molecule. That seems to be the only two options.
I disagree, because number one, that wasn't an explosion that indicated damage. That was an extrusion of every element of the ship pulled apart, and then you saw conscious living beings glancing around trying to take in the experience that they had, which to me tells me that all of this is an on-purpose experience to bring them into something else. I don't think, to be honest, the way I read it is that they're not dead and they're not they're not being absorbed by proto-molecule. They're being welcomed or quarantined or some kind of supernatural experience. But again, I haven't read the books.
I pretty much think they're dead. That's where I'm at.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting. I know. Adam Savage is one of those people on that ship, and nobody wants the Mythbuster to die.
Oh, no, I do.
I get it.
I actively want him. He was delightful when I met him, but that dude needs to die in that universe.
Yeah, and of course we like you say, we basically leave all three, Belter, Earth, and Mars, with guns pointed at each other's head. Otherwise, that's about it.
Yeah.
Let's go to Better Call Saul, episode 2, season 3, wherein Jimmy McGill weasels his way, or tries several times to weasel his way out of the charges that are being brought against him. And we find out that, in fact, his brother's end game was not to put him in jail, even though he had to spend a night in jail, but to get him to stop practicing the law. And this is Chuck's modus operandi, which is, I am the lawyer. Jimmy is not good enough to practice the law. And the idea of Jimmy practicing the law in any kind of manner, even successful or not, is abhorrent to me. So I will use this opportunity to crush him and push him out of practicing the law.
Yeah, which also, I mean, I guess it's satisfying to get to that point, to watch him do his machinations, but wasn't that your impression? It was my impression from the very beginning that was his end game. So to see it played out was not surprising, although it was satisfying.
I thought he actually wanted Jimmy to spend some time in jail and then be disbarred. Right. For sure. I didn't realize that it was like he feels like he's being kind to Jimmy. Right. This isn't just vengeance. This is him. It's a different take than I thought. I thought he wanted to crush Jimmy. He doesn't just want to crush Jimmy. He actually wants the best for Jimmy, which I think makes this even worse, where it's like, wow, you are so full of your own opinion that you think you can dictate Jimmy's life and keep him away from the law, when really you're just jealous.
That's so interesting, because I don't believe for 1 second that he actually feels any of that. I feel like all of that is the show. I think at his core, he and Jimmy are the same person, as brothers often tend to be, but he has wrapped himself up in this facade of righteous indignation, and that's what he outwardly portrays. But on the inside,
I think he tells himself he's being kind to Jimmy.
I mean, he certainly tells Jimmy
when he says that
kind.
to Jimmy, I think he thinks he means it. And I think you're right that peeling back that onion, that is not his motivation, but he's lying to himself about it.
Yeah, I disagree with you on that. I don't think he believes it in his heart of hearts. I think much like the Spider or Littlefinger or not the Spider, Varys or Littlefinger, I think he is wearing the cloak he needs to wear to get the things done that he needs to get done. But in his heart of hearts, he knows that he's crushing his brother. I would almost
respect him more if that were true, because at least then he's being true to himself. And I think Chuck, I mean, given the condition that he has, he's not a person who's honest.
Let me amend my position. I think he believes he's helping Jimmy exactly to the degree he believes that electricity harms him. By which I mean, like,
yes,
that's a
very good way of putting it.
Convenient, flexible belief he has.
Yeah.
Here and there, right?
Yeah, I can fly with that. Definitely.
Yeah. Meanwhile, real quick, loved the vignette with Ehrmantraut, which, by the way, you mentioned, we haven't gotten into it yet, but you mentioned that that in Fargo, you thought the mentioning of Mr. Ehrmantraut was a reference to Breaking Bad. One thing I didn't know, because I hadn't seen it at the time, was that, of course, our character is Mike Ehrmantraut. They mentioned specifically it's a guy named Tom Ehrmantraut. So I'm less inclined to believe that was a deliberate
I don't think it's the same
call-out.
universe. I just thought the writers might have been given a nod.
Yeah. Well, but also Ehrmantraut's a fairly Minnesotan name, it seems like.
If I'm looking for a Minnesota name and I'm a Breaking Bad fan,
sure. Seems as good as anything else. Love the vignette with Mike shooting the shoes to
genius.
dribble.
He's a genius.
Yeah.
Mike is the best tactician planner of TV.
That's his
MacGyver.
superpower. His superpower is unlimited time and patience. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be a super genius tactician if you get unlimited rewinds and you can see all the possible ways something will ever go always, and you have unlimited time because, in this ill-defined retired cop world, we know he's super steadfast and can just sit there forever. Mm-hmm. But I loved the way they unpacked the story, because I was my favorite thing is being surprised and confused. And I was surprised and confused why he kept shooting up in the air. And then you realize...
It took me a couple times. And then I was like, oh, he wants to inure them to... It's like, yeah, it took me about half his shots before I started to figure it out.
Exactly. Yeah, no, he was priming them to not be worried about the sound of gunshots or whatever.
And to not think about it either when they get detained right? They can't. They were hunters, right? No one was shooting at us. How was that connected to this coke?
Correct. Exactly.
So smart.
Yeah. No, it was way good. I thought. I think, and I know. Stop me if you've heard me say this before, but and stop me when you hear me say it again. I think we saw the genesis of the actual Saul Goodman when, like that moment.
I've heard you say this before.
That moment at the beginning where he's just sitting there smoking that ratty ass old cigarette on the curb, and his brother comes up and tries to feed him that line about how this is all good for him and it's the right thing, and he says, "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to die alone." And then he sees the cop car and he's like, "That's my ride." That was amazing. That was amazing, and it's great to see that crucible out of which is coming our Saul Goodman instead of Jimmy McGill.
And yet, even with that being another Genesis point, you're absolutely right. We still don't know how he gets there.
Agreed.
So it's still interesting to watch. You're still like, okay, but what's the next step? Like, how does he actually become Saul? So. I'm further confused by Kim still standing by his side. I keep thinking, this is the thing that's going to drive the wedge between Kim, and that's why she's not around in later years. And here she goes. She comes in and tries to defend him, and he, tries to push her away, but then she's still there, like understands and is with him. Like, it's crazy.
Man, I gotta tell you, I think Kim. I think we're meant to feel like she leaves him. I wouldn't be surprised if instead we watch, because we've seen Kim move from a distance to arm's length to shoulder width, and we're seeing her get closer and closer to him. I would not put it past this show for us to watch her totally fall in love with him and for them to be a thing and for her to get killed or something terrible to happen.
And that could be what pushes him over the edge to Saul Goodman. Yeah, that's a really, really likely.
That's a
scenario.
Dark possibility that I don't think I'd really considered until the last few episodes.
And they were really trying to dangle the first two seasons of like, see, Kim doesn't really trust. She likes Jimmy, but she knows he's bad. Like, she's just going to leave him someday. And I think that the more you've totally convinced me, like, that is a deception.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I mean, even with that possibility, that's the.
I don't know. Maybe she works at a Cinnabon in Oklahoma. Who knows?
that's the challenge of watching anyone fall in love, is knowing that heartbreak is just around the corner.
Yeah.
But that doesn't in any way reduce the joy I feel watching these two fall in love.
All right, let's move along to Fargo, episode 2 of season 3. This is Brian catching up, finishing the rest of episode 1 and also getting episode 2 underway. And I was a little surprised how quickly the front organization just moves in and starts taking over the operations of the real estate agency. And yet it does seem like the brother and his, murder of the probation guy that he wanted that he hired to kill or to steal the stamp, that moved a little slower than I expected.
Yeah. Real quick side project. I tweeted recently a clip from Snatch and a clip from Fargo, because the bad guy, the mysterious guy in Fargo, seems to me to be, if not a transparent ripoff, at least a wink and a nod homage to the character of Bricktop from Snatch. Now, it could be that I'm totally, an American and I don't. I mean,
he's a character from Snatch if he's not Bricktop himself. Yeah.
So here, take a little quick listen to Bricktop from Snatch here. Let's see.
Cut a corpse into 6 pieces and pile it all together.
Would someone mind telling me? Who are you?
And when you've got your 6 pieces, you got to get rid of them, because it's no good leaving it in the deep freeze for your mum to discover now, is it?
So it goes on to talk about how to dispose of a body, right?
Same region, same accent, same pattern of speech, same age, roughly.
Same teeth and all that stuff. Same bemused bewilderment about the daftness of everyone around him and so on.
Also, I don't think he's the final bad. I think we'll get introduced to someone else above him.
I agree, but so let me. So there's 2 main, I guess 3 main conflicts. Number one, you have Nora from Leftovers solving the murder of her stepfather, which is a fine procedural unraveling of a yarn that I'm sure we'll get to. You have the brother conflict unraveling and the tug of war over the stamp, which I think strikes me as the most interesting. And I don't know if that's just because, I loved this idea that he went in to make up with his brother on a pretext to get the stamp stolen, didn't get the stamp stolen. She overplayed her hand by leaving the tampon. And he felt like, well, wait, I actually feel like I did reconcile with my brother. And now it's all for naught because of what she did. Correct.
That was such a wonderful ballet.
And then you have the third thread, which is the dawning horror of realizing that the Stussy Corporation has gotten in bed with some very, very bad men, right?
Yeah.
And there's that moment when he says, why the long faces? You're going to be billionaires. And then you kind of feel this white light of hope. And he goes, at least on paper. And then it's like, oh, geez, no, this is not great.
Yeah, they're not here to benefit them at all.
Yeah.
And I love, this is something that all the seasons of Fargo have done well, which is the unexpected inspector, right? It was Hanks in one season. This time it's Carrie Coon, it's Nora, and it's the wild card who's not really supposed to be investigating this. It's a cold case. Guy broke in, was a robber, freaked out, killed the old man. Nobody thinks it bears further investigation, but of course, because it's her step grandfather, she's going to keep looking into it. And there's more mystery around him with the science fiction novels, and she finds a lead, and the lead is going to point directly back to one of the Stussy brothers, which is going to bring unexpected attention on him from a quarter he didn't anticipate. And he is actively going after his brothers still, which is going to bring him into conflict with the front organization. So you can already see how all of these particles are headed towards each other. You just don't know how they're going to impact exactly.
Yeah. Well, and regardless of where it goes from here, and even if this is becoming an increasingly familiar song, I still like the tune,
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing wrong with a cover, right?
Yeah.
As long as it's sung well.
Yeah. That was always my defense of the first Cars movie, is everyone's like, it's just Doc Hollywood. It's like, yeah. And when Lady Gaga covers Amazing Grace, you know exactly what that song sounds like. But
Totally.
Aren't you glad to hear a masterful performer cover it? And that's what, Cars was for me.
All right, let's get to the leftovers, episode 3 of season 3, which is entirely in Australia. We've had character-focused episodes throughout this series, and this year, we focused on Kevin in episode 1 and Nora in episode 2, but this one really was entirely in Australia. The only time we get Miracle is when he calls the Reverend, and we find out his journey and backstory, and honestly, I don't think we even find out anything that revelatory. They even do a little bit of hand waving to explain that hotel scene that Kevin saw when he was dead. But I just loved this journey. I loved being along for the ride to see what he could get away with, and to hear what anyone in their right mind would discount as the ravings of a madman. But this show has done a magic spell on me to the point where I'm like, well, yeah, that's the ravings of a madman, but it fits in this universe. So there's probably more to it.
That's so interesting to hear you say, because I think we both assessed it identically. I think everything you said about what this episode served is correct. And yet, to me, I didn't experience a lot of joy watching it. I was not overly interested in it. Like, I'm glad this was the Silmarillion. Basically, this is all backstory for me.
Yeah.
This was like satisfying a bunch of. They went back and spackled in all the cracks of the story up until now, and I'm glad they bothered to do that. Wasn't terribly exciting or interesting for me to watch. Bryce, did you watch
it's all about the character. If you want to spend time with this character, no matter what he's doing, you'll enjoy this episode. If you want to advance the story, you're not going to get that.
Well, maybe it's because up until now they've always represented him as kind of a wild card. So he's never stepped into the protagonist role. This is the first time that we've seen him as a protagonist. And by the end, it was clear, like, oh, these are the rational choices of an individual who is trying to figure it out just like we are. But it was just late to resonate with me. And again, it wasn't that I didn't like it. It's very, very good, and it's beautiful, and the story's amazing, and yeah, there were moments like him just rolling his eyes, be like, "Yeah, I threw away your damn book," to Doctor Who. That I'm just like, well, you're kind of dismissing giant plot points, and I don't know what a fan I am of that, but whatever.
But I think Styx telling Doctor Who he threw away his book was ending up being the reason why the one page that survived became significant.
Well,
right?
and I think I think I didn't care for how precious that was. That was so tidy and so neat. And this is a show that normally doesn't obsess with completeness in that way. Bryce, are you caught up? Did you follow this?
Yeah, I saw it this morning. I actually hearing Tom talk about it made me feel differently a little bit about it. Like we talked a little bit about it.
Yeah.
And it was definitely like, okay, so this is filling out some steps that we already knew. But I think it also continues to put fuel on the fire of, hey, there's probably something really supernatural happening here, and all of this stuff that might otherwise be crazy now has a couple more flimsy support structures.
Sure.
We're getting closer to the just like the what is it? Like we're closer to believing it and finding it true than thinking it's true or having a lot of good theories.
Right.
I don't know. It's
we know
interesting.
Kevin and Nora are headed to Australia.
Yeah.
And so that's gonna start tying things together. We know that this story has had an effect. So whatever happens to that last copy now becomes interesting because maybe it'll have more effects. And Brian, have you accommodated yourself to the idea that was old Nora at the end of episode 1?
I mean, if you say so.
Do you have your phone on you?
Yeah, I do. Specifically,
I meant to do this earlier. I
like
forgot.
by the way, I don't doubt it. I don't think all the blogs are misreporting it. I just question how clearly they conveyed that in their storytelling. Because it was what?
I took a screenshot of it yesterday.
Yeah.
And it was there. And now it's
vanished.
not.
Now
Power of Kevin.
We are the leftovers. Your image of Nora is gone.
It vanished. It departed.
It's totally just a black screen. And it was maybe I was wrong. Maybe it wasn't there. No, I did a screenshot just so you could look because I wanted you to be able to look at it yourself.
I mean, again, I don't doubt it. I don't doubt anything you guys are saying. I just question like
well, now I doubt it.
Oh my gosh, look at that.
Yeah, were you watching on your phone?
Yeah.
Because I know Netflix will do it. I wouldn't be surprised if HBO does it, but you can't take screenshots anymore. It'll black it out. I don't know how
I could have sworn I looked at it afterwards, but you're probably right. I'm probably just imagining it.
Bummer.
Why wouldn't?
So
anyway.
Justified.
Okay. So yeah, Justified, episode 3, season 6. So, I mean, we had this very straightforward story, right? It was Boyd going after robbing the people in the pizza joint. People in the pizza joint trying to buy up land and not happy with Boyd trying to rob them. And then we had a brief interlude with woman who's hiring Boyd having an interlude with Sam Elliott. So now this episode, we just sprinkle in the complication of Sam Elliott's character being the person who's employing the folks at the pizza joint, threatening Ava and Boyd in a way that Boyd realizes he can't fight back right now, so he might as well just, back off and play like he's going to go along. And, of course, getting the revelation from his boss that she is, in fact, sleeping with Avery.
Yeah. So, number one, the way this episode began, I really adored because, to me, the core thread that has me fully engaged in this season is strangely not Boyd, not Raylan, not any of the machinations around them, but the creeping insanity that has to be growing in Ava Crowder. This is somebody who already has a tenuous, complicated emotional relationship with Raylan, with Boyd, and so on. Now she is stuck in the literal crosshairs between the two, and as she is fighting to rekindle her deep emotional connection with her fiancé for the purpose of sending him to jail so that she will not go to jail, because she is being held essentially prisoner by the other ex-lover in her life. And it's like I love that moment where, with the sadness, Raylan says, man, of all the mornings for you to show up half in the bag, this is a bad one. You know, that was great. And I'm like, what else is she supposed to do? How do you cope with that? How do you deal with that surreality?
I mean, and also arguably she's doing her job, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're right. More than anything, she's coping, but also she can very justifiably say, you know how I get close to Boyd and find out what he's up to? I do shit like that.
Yeah.
That's how.
Yeah, exactly. That to me is the most interesting aspect. That and every living millisecond that Sam Elliott shows up on screen and just chews up the scene, just gobbles it up. I'm watching a bovine with 6 stomachs just chew up the scene.
This scene is Sam Elliott's, and he's just gonna eat it 6 times, and you're gonna love it. And it's amazing.
And
yeah.
I don't know how he projects an astral mustache. Like, even though he doesn't have one, you can see it there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, you're right. I remember him with a mustache. All times. Yeah, I don't have much more to say about this. It was a strong episode, but it wasn't revelatory because we already knew Sam Elliott. We knew Avery and her were getting along. So it was just seeing Boyd come to the realization and watching these pieces move around the chessboard.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up the chessboard metaphor, because remember, chess games are interesting because everything is threatening everything else at the same time. And when something moves, nobody dies, but it just changes who's threatening what in which way. And it's fun to feel that tension until when things do collapse, oftentimes they collapse very, very quickly. But I am feeling that for the first time in a long time on this series. I'm feeling real tension, and I'm seeing a finite number of pieces all jockeying for everything. By the way, for the record, for the love of God, let me just offer a prayer. If there's anyone upstairs, let me look as good as Wynn Duffy when I'm 55 years old, because that dude, fit as a fiddle and tanning in his bed.
Absolutely. And I have more and more respect for him the more I see him on Justified and Angie Tribeca, and just nailing both roles, which are both him, but entirely different.
Yeah, I believe it, man. But definitely enjoying it. I am really excited to know, and granted, we're in the last season, and it will be fleeting and come and go. Everything so far has been pretty good, with a few moments of great. I have the strong suspicion that everything from here on out is just great.
So you think what you're saying is
don't you drop the J-bomb.
You think us spending this much time watching the show in the end will be worth it?
Yes.
I think it's a justified.
God damn it! No!
All right. Hey, just a side note here. Ava Crowder, of course, played by the awesome Joelle Carter. I turned on the TV, the TiVo, which is over the air, and was going for one of the things that was recorded on the TiVo, and I saw her in Chicago Justice, I think, one of those shows anyway.
Yeah. She
doesn't have a Kentucky accent. So I was like, oh, look, it's Ava. And then she opened her mouth. I'm like, is that even what she sounds like?
Yeah, that's one of the weird things about seeing Nora as the former chief of police. Oh, which, by the way, in Fargo, I thought that was an interesting thread in that it wasn't a dramatic, being deposed from her role as chief. It's just that the county is absorbing this, and she's got a new boss. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We appreciate you very much. As we mentioned on Cordkillers, we have a new project underway. If we get 1,850 patrons, we're going to start a project to clip out all of the individual Spoilerin Time episodes around the actual shows and create specific feeds around the show. So a Justified feed and a Shield feed and all of that. So if that is of interest to you, we'll have more details at patreon.com/Cordkillers. We'll spoil you next time.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.